Okay, so when you think about some of the most, let's say, memorable cinematic failures of the 1990s, well, there's a short list, right?
Oh, yeah?
And one title almost always pops up. You remember the sort of critical size, the box office
You
reports?
talking about Barb Wire,
Yeah,
Pamela Anderson, 1996.
exactly. Barb Wire. And here's the thing that's got everyone talking. It kind of came out of nowhere.
Pamela Anderson herself is developing a serialized remake
Yeah.
of that exact movie.
It's wild, isn't it? But it's more than just a funny headline. It feels like a moment.
Mm.
And that's why we wanted to do this deep dive, because this isn't just about one show coming back. It really taps into these bigger patterns we're seeing everywhere in Hollywood right now.
Yeah, the whole IP revival obsession, for one.
Right, that relentless hunt for existing properties. And also this trend of family getting involved in production, maybe to control the story, the legacy.
And the tricky balance, trying to use nostalgia but also make something genuinely new, something for today's audience.
So we've dug into the history, the reviews, the analysis, what people are saying now. And for you listening, our mission here is to unpack this whole thing.
From why it failed so spectacularly back then to why maybe, just maybe, it could work now. Can you really take a notorious flop and turn it into a hit series like almost 30 years later? That's the big question.
Let's start back in '96. You really have to remember the vibe then. Anderson was, arguably one of the most famous women on the planet because of Baywatch.
Absolutely peak global fame. And Universal Pictures saw that. They basically put their $9 million budget, squarely on her star power.
And they adapted this dark horse comic, Barb Wire.
Yeah, and the premise itself was, well, it was very 90s. Sources always point this out. It was trying to be a kind of dystopian riff on Casablanca.
Seriously, Casablanca.
Sort of. Instead of wartime Morocco, you've got this future war-torn America, like the year 2017, which seemed far off then. And Anderson is Barb Wire, running this nightclub in Steel Harbor, this neutral zone, leather-clad,
Yeah, the
cuffed.
Rick Blaine character.
Pretty much. And like Rick, she gets pulled back into the fight when an old flame shows up needing help. Choosing sides versus staying neutral.
Okay, on paper, I can kind of see it. Leveraging a classic story structure. Gritty future. Star power.
Yeah, the ingredients seem to be there, but the execution, that's where things went wrong.
Commercially, it was just bad.
Oh, a total disaster. Critics didn't just dislike it, they shredded it. I remember seeing reviews calling it a cinematic train wreck, cynical exploitation, just brutal stuff.
And the box office reflected that, right?
Absolutely. It made just over $3 million domestically.
Right.
Against that $9 million budget.
Oof.
Yeah. It wasn't just a flop. It basically disappeared. Became this weird, like you said, late-night cable curiosity.
Yeah.
Something you'd stumble upon and go, wait, what is this?
But hang on, because I want to push back a little on just calling it a failure and leaving it there. Because the story didn't quite end in '96, did it?
No, that's a really good point. This is where it gets interesting.
Sources point out that over the years, it actually built up this weird kind of cult status.
Yeah.
Is that real, though, or just people remembering a famous bomb?
I think it's a bit of both, but there's definitely some genuine, maybe ironic affection there. It's that whole kitsch culture thing.
Right.
It found an audience that loved it because it was so over the top. They celebrated the aesthetics, the way it just leaned into Anderson's whole persona at the time, the kind of cheap but ambitious world building.
So what was seen as maybe exploitative or just silly then?
Gets reappraised now through this lens of intentional camp. Maybe it was smarter than we thought, or at least funnier in its ambition.
That reframing feels really important for what's happening now. Which brings us to today. Why this specific project for a revival?
And this is key, according to our sources.
Yeah.
It's deeply personal. It's driven by her and her family. This isn't some studio just dusting off old IP.
Right, that's the huge difference. Anderson is developing it with her sons, Brandon and Dylan Lee, their producers.
That completely changes the narrative around it. It's not just a cash grab. It feels like something more about, well, legacy, control.
Yeah, let's unpack that family angle because it seems crucial. First, there's that legacy building piece. Anderson is stepping into the producer role, taking control.
Exactly. She's not just the star being put into a project. She's shaping it.
Yeah.
It's a way to reframe her own career history, especially regarding this specific notorious film.
And then there's the generational collaboration. Her sons aren't just names on a title card, presumably.
Right. They bring that younger perspective. That's vital if you want this to connect beyond the original audience. How do you make 90s camp relevant to, say, Gen Z? They bridge that gap.
They understand the current aesthetic, the platforms.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the idea. They help translate it.
But maybe the biggest driver here is control over image. I mean, Pamela Anderson's public perception has shifted so dramatically in recent years.
Massively. You had the Hulu series Pam and Tommy, which, regardless of how people felt about it, definitely generated sympathy and a new perspective.
And her memoir, which is very personal, very raw.
Yeah, all of that changes how people see her. So, revisiting Barb Wire now isn't just revisiting a bad movie. It's a chance to reclaim it, maybe infuse it with a feminist perspective, or at least a perspective of agency she didn't have back then.
Turn the exploitation narrative on its head.
Potentially, yeah. It gives the whole project this built-in meta-commentary that the original just couldn't have. Audiences eat that stuff up now.
Okay, so the personal drive is clearly there. Strong motivations, but for it to actually work in the market, things need to line up right.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
conditions have to be right.
Our sources seem to point to three main hypotheses for why this could succeed in, say, 2025 when it bombed so hard in 1996.
Right. Let's break those down. The first one is basically Hypothesis 1, from flop to cult rebirth. This hinges on that cultural shift we talked about.
What was dismissed back then is potentially cool now.
Pretty much. That kind of stylized, maybe even slightly trashy, self-aware aesthetic,
Yeah.
it wasn't really rewarded in mainstream 90s action movies. But today,
Today, audiences are way more fluent in irony, in camp. They appreciate anti-heroes, gritty worlds, that meta layer.
exactly. Think about shows like Euphoria or The Boys. They use extreme style, violence, often a kind of heightened reality or dystopia to say something. It's edgy. It's intentional.
And Barb Wire's original DNA, the leather, the dystopia, the sort of over-the-top action, could fit that mold now.
If done right, yeah. If the writing is sharp, if it feels like it's in on the joke, not just the joke itself, the raw material, visually and thematically, might actually be an asset today.
Which leads perfectly into the second idea. Hypothesis 2, streaming is the perfect platform. This feels like a big one.
Huge. Back in '96, it was all about the theatrical release, box office or bust, and that $9 million budget really limited what they could show.
Right, you mentioned the Casablanca thing, this whole world.
Right.
Hard to build that in 98 minutes on a tight budget.
Impossible, basically. The original Dark Horse comic apparently had a much richer world, more complex politics, resistance movements. The movie barely scratched the surface.
But a streaming series, that changes everything.
Totally. You get, what, 8, 10 hours? Room to breathe. You can actually build out Steel Harbor, explore the characters, the factions, do the world building justice.
It fits that binge watch model where people invest in a world and characters over time.
And streamers love this kind of thing, don't they? Taking existing IP, even failed IP, that has some name recognition but maybe doesn't cost a fortune to acquire.
Yeah, they gamble on it. Sometimes it works brilliantly, like The Witcher.
Sometimes it really doesn't. We saw that with, like, the live-action Cowboy Bebop or that Resident Evil series on Netflix. High-profile flameouts.
So the platform helps, but it's no guarantee.
Definitely not. It's still high risk, high reward, but the potential is there. In a way, it just wasn't for a 90s mid-budget movie.
Okay, and the third angle, which we touched on, feels maybe the most powerful. Hypothesis 3, the feminist reframing.
This ties back directly to Anderson's changed public image.
Yeah, that whole narrative shift after Pam and Tommy in her memoir, it's undeniable.
It just completely recasts her role. The project gains this potential for commentary on agency, on sexuality, on power, things the original film maybe fumbled or ignored, or was even complicit in problems around.
So in 96, Barb Wire might have seemed like just a caricature, right? A male gaze version of a powerful woman.
Exactly. But today, that same character, produced by Anderson herself, could be read completely differently. As a woman taking control within a broken, exploitative system, both in the show's world and metatextually in Hollywood.
It allows Anderson to be the author, not the object. To take that cultural punchline, as some call the original film, and turn it into something resonant.
A statement about resilience, maybe, reclaiming her own story. It's a fascinating creative possibility, a kind of historical revisionism through art.
It sounds compelling, but okay, let's be realistic. No revival is a sure thing. There are always hurdles. What are the big challenges here? What are the sources warning about?
Well, the first big one is the nostalgia trap. Is the nostalgia for Barb Wire actually strong enough or wide enough?
Right. It's probably pretty niche, isn't it? Gen X, maybe some older millennials remember it. Does Gen Z care?
Probably not intrinsically. So you need more than just nostalgia. It has to stand on its own for a younger audience who has zero connection to the original. It doesn't have that built-in reverence of, say, Star Wars or
And the
something.
genre itself,
Yeah.
super crowded.
Hugely. That's the market saturation problem. Superhero fatigue is real. Anti-hero fatigue might be setting in, too. Audiences have seen a lot of this kind of stuff.
And they're pretty unforgiving if it feels mediocre or derivative. You look at some recent DC movies that stumbled.
Exactly. You
Hmm.
can't just show up with a cool concept. The execution has to be top-notch. It needs to look expensive, feel fresh, avoid that trap of looking like, well, a low-budget 90s movie.
Which means they need a decent budget this time.
For sure. To compete with the visual standard of shows like The Last of Us or House of the Dragon, you need resources.
And then there's that generational gap again. How do you market this to younger viewers?
That's where the family involvement, the sons, hopefully comes in. They need smart, savvy marketing. TikTok, Instagram,
Yeah.
finding the right influencers, making it feel current and essential, not just a throwback.
It needs to connect with their culture, not just rely on their parents' memories.
Precisely. And finally, there's just the hurdle of critical skepticism. Let's be honest, a lot of critics are probably going into this with raised eyebrows.
Yeah, remembering the original, maybe thinking it's just a vanity project.
Right. There's likely an immediate goodwill deficit. They'll have to overcome that bias right out of the gate with really strong execution, compelling storytelling. Otherwise, it could easily get dismissed.
Okay. So weighing all that, the original flop, the personal stakes now, those three hypotheses for why it could work, and these very real challenges, where do we land? What's the takeaway from this deep dive?
I think the analysis suggests this project actually has a, well, surprisingly decent shot. Not necessarily at being a massive mainstream blockbuster hit like a Marvel movie, but at carving out a really specific, potentially profitable niche, like a cult prestige space. It feels designed for the way streaming works now.
Leveraging that family story, the self-aware angle.
Exactly. It hits those current trends.
Yeah.
Using known IP, smartly complex female antiheroes, that authentic creator-driven feel, because Anderson is steering it. Strategically, it makes a lot of sense.
So looking bigger picture, what Anderson's doing here, it's more than just reviving an old movie, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It
Okay.
feels like a really shrewd industry move, actually. Using the tools available now, streaming Valley Production Company, to seize control of her own narrative, to take something that was used against her, in a way, and transform it.
Turning that punchline into a statement about resilience, creativity.
Yeah, and the attempt itself, whether it fully succeeds or not, tells us a lot about where Hollywood is heading. This idea that no IP, no story is ever truly dead. It can always be remixed, reframed.
And maybe the best revenge against a past failure is just a really bold remake.
Exactly. If they pull this off, Barb Wire could become this fascinating case study. Proof that even the most unlikely, maybe even infamous, ideas can find a second life, maybe even a more powerful one, decades later.